reviews is harder than it seems because there's so much I want to unpack with this film, but it's so tough. This is the dilemma I face every time I do a movie review, but let's get to it. This is for Solo, a Star Wars story, and as always, this is going to be a spoiler review because I really want to get down into the nitty-gritty of what I liked and didn't like about this film. But for you spoiler-free loving people, I'll give you a quick rundown of my overall thoughts of the film, spoiler-free. I liked it. I liked this film a lot, actually. I don't know if it's because I went in there with such low expectations, but after letting this film marinate in my brain for a couple days now, I really start to like it more and more I think about it. You know, there are a few missteps and there are a few pacing issues, there are a few issues here and there that I will get into in spoiler talk, but overall, it was a good film. I'd give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now that that's done, let's get into it. This film stars Alden Ehrenreich as a younger, more inexperienced Han Solo. This is about 10 or maybe 15 years before A New Hope. He's a little more naive, he's a little more inexperienced, and I really like that. He basically meets up with a band of outlaws, really, joins up with them and really becomes a part of their group as they try to steal this precious cargo to deliver to a crime boss who works for an even bigger crime boss, who we'll get to in a second. This is more of a spiritual journey for Han as he's trying to get home to meet up with the love of his life, Kira. Spoiler alert, I don't think she's going to remain the love of his life for very long. I'm going to get into this more later, probably more toward the end of the video, but here's one thing I really want to say. There was a lot of controversy going into this film. As you know, Phil Lord and Chris Miller were attached to direct, and they filmed up to 75% of the movie, only for them to be fired and then Ron Howard take their place, and then basically reshoot almost the entire film, apparently. Not all of it, but pretty much all of it, to the point where he has sole credit. It's Ron Howard's film. It's directed by Ron Howard. I don't really care about all that right now. I just want a good movie. I don't let the controversy that happens behind the scenes or the politics that happen in the movie industry affect how I view a film. Judging by the box office numbers here, there's either two things that are happening. People are so put off by this behind the scenes controversy that they're not seeing the film, or two, a lot of people just aren't interested in a Han Solo movie. I'm definitely part of the latter. I didn't really want a Han Solo film. A lot of people didn't really want it. That mixed with the behind the scenes controversy kind of made me not want to see the film, but I'm glad I did because it's an enjoyable film. And this is really what I want to get down to here. I'm only going to mention this briefly and then I'll touch on it again at the end of the video. Us as a fan base, we need to just take a breath. Breathe in, breathe out. I know that Star Wars is important to a lot of people. Star Wars is very important to me too, but in the end, guys, it's just a movie. Calm down. People's expectations are way too high for Star Wars. If this film wasn't called Solo, I think it would be getting better reviews. But because people put Star Wars on such a high pedestal, I think people are kind of viewing this film a lot more negatively than it should. It's The Last Jedi all over again. And as you know, I like The Last Jedi. I plan on doing a video on why it's genius later down the future. But anyway, I'll get back to that later on. Overall, I really enjoyed the film. One thing I loved about this film is that this is obviously the most Western-inspired Star Wars film, even more than the first one. Lawrence Kasdan, as you all know, loves Westerns, and he really brings that Western flair. Him and Ron Howard bring that Western flair into this movie, and if you don't know, I love Westerns, huge Western guy. So the fact that this is almost like a Western Star Wars film, I loved it. The first one had little hints there, but this is almost like a full-blown Western, to having gunslingers, train heists, gambling. The atmosphere is very Western. I loved it. But how were the performances? Again, going back to the controversy, there was a lot of talk that Alden Ehrenreich wasn't a good Han Solo and that he needed acting coaches, blah, 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 blah. Alden Ehrenreich was such a good Han Solo because he made the character his own. He wasn't doing just an impression of Harrison Ford. He's a more naive and inexperienced Han Solo who's learning his ropes and learning the way of the galaxy as he goes. I think that Alden Ehrenreich really captured the fact that this isn't the Han Solo you know. This is a Han Solo before he was Han Solo. And I like that. It wasn't just a Harrison Ford impression. He really made it his own. I think he's getting a little too much flack for this film. All the performances were great. Woody Harrelson was great. Emilia Clarke was great. But here's a controversial opinion. I was not the biggest fan of Donald Glover as Lando. And look, I like Donald Glover as an actor, but I think people are just so obsessed with him right now because he's such a rising star that people are sort of just blindly praising him. He was good in the movie, and he didn't bother me. but I think his performance was a little too much of an impression of Billy D. Williams. And most people disagree with me. The only people I have seen agree with me on this has been Double Toasted. They agreed that Donald Glover is basically just doing a Lando impression, and that it kind of took them out of the movie. And when I was watching the movie, I felt the same way. As soon as he started talking, I'm like, ugh, he's obviously doing a Billy D. Williams impression. He should really be making the character his own. But overall, it's still a good performance. It's not a bad one by any means. So please don't kill me in the comments. This isn't a film where it's like you don't know what you want until you want it, something like Guardians of the Galaxy was. This is a film where it's kind of like, I didn't really want a Han Solo film, but now that it's here, you know what? I'm just gonna strap in and enjoy the ride. And I did. Seeing Han meet Chewie was really cool, and it was a really creative way because they basically throw him down this pit and they're like, oh, feed him to the beast. And I was expecting like a Rancor or like a Wampa or something. No, it's freaking Chewbacca. And seeing them fight was badass. After that, Han and Chewie both escape. They team up to escape this prison and basically meet up with Beckett, played by Woody Harrelson, and his crew. I liked Woody Harrelson in this role, and I liked the crew. There was an amazing train heist sequence. It honestly blew me away. I was not expecting the action to be that good in this film, and it is spectacular. Some of the best in Star Wars I think I've seen, at least in the newer Star Wars films. Just to further the point of how this is a Western film, some of the villains in this film are actual marauders, you know, and they dress very Western-esque, almost like cowboys and Indians, and it's amazing. I really enjoyed it. One character I'm a little torn on is L3, who is the droid of Lando. I'm past the whole sassy droid thing. Sometimes I really liked her, but then other times I'm like, oh gosh. One thing I will say is that this film has hints of it was directed by two sets of people, with Lord and Miller doing this and Ron Howard doing this. Technically 3 people, but I'll just say 2 people for sake of argument. You can tell that some parts were directed by different people. A lot of the L3 stuff kind of reeks of Lord and Miller. Now, I could be totally wrong because I don't know who filmed what, but some of the stuff seemed a little out of place, and a lot of what seemed out of place was the humor. And obviously Lord and Miller are the comedic directors. They wanted to make this more of a Guardians of the Galaxy type thing. It shows in some scenes. And I did not really like L3 that much in some scenes, but then there are a few parts, like when she's talking to Emilia Clarke saying that Lando is in love with her, kind of being like oblivious to the fact that she's a droid, is hilarious. In those small moments, I like her, but when she's like starting this revolution and stuff for like her kind, which is like, it seemed like this weird Force allegory for something. I don't know, it was just weird. Thankfully, she's not in the film that much, so it didn't really bother me in the long run. It was really cool seeing younger versions of everyone, not just of people, but seeing the younger versions of the Millennium Falcon and seeing the origins of how him and Lando met and how Han got the Falcon and how Han got his blaster. What I really liked about this film, and what I was a little worried about going into it, was that they were going to stop the movie. Like, as soon as Beckett handed him his blaster, I was expecting like, whoa, like this is an amazing blaster, look at this. But no, the movie just keeps going. He just hands him the blaster, he looks at it, done. The dice aren't really explained, they're just something he has. The film didn't stop to basically throw it in your face. It didn't throw the nostalgia in your face like haha, this is how Han got his blaster. No, Beckett just hands him the blaster and that's it. I know I'm jumping ahead here, but the whole Han shot first thing, I actually didn't mind that at all. Some people have been complaining that it's too obvious what they're trying to say. I don't think that's true, because when I saw that in the theaters, I thought they were referencing Indiana Jones, because Harrison Ford, you know, basically did that in Indiana Jones. I thought that's what they were referencing. It wasn't until after the movie where people told me, and I'm like, oh yeah, the Han shot first thing. Like, that's what they were referencing. I don't even know if that's what they were referencing really, as to more of, that's kind of how the character evolves. Like, the character has an arc from where he is in the beginning of the movie to where he is in the end. I think it's a slight arc. I think the arc should have been more intense, but I think that's basically showing that he's becoming the scoundrel and the nerf herder that we know him to be. So I didn't think that was forced. I actually really enjoyed that. I liked that part a lot. The Kessel Run. That was an amazing scene, because a lot of people, we didn't know what the Kessel Run was. I always thought the Kessel Run was a race. That's how he basically won the ship from Lando, just because, you know, we put that in our head. But the Kessel Run was actually a lot cooler than I imagined, because the Kessel Run is almost just like a path to Kessel, where a parsec is like a distance. You know, they say that the Kessel Run can only be completed in 20 parsecs, and he does it in 12 or under 12. And that was just an amazing, nail-biting scene. But now let's get into the biggest reveal of the movie here. Frickin' Darth Maul is in this movie. What? That caught me completely off guard. Like, holy crap. Yeah, Kira is working for Darth Maul. Dryden Voss was working for Darth Maul. Holy crap, that is amazing. I've heard a lot of people who don't really follow the Star Wars lore, they're very confused because they thought Darth Maul died. But if you watch the Clone Wars or Rebels, you know he didn't. Here's the thing though, I don't watch the Clone Wars or Rebels, and I knew he survived. You know, I don't know why, I just knew that he always came back in Legends or in the show. I always knew he came back with mechanical legs. Plus they show the mechanical legs, but I guess if you don't know any better, you're not really looking at that. So a lot of reviewers have been like, what? That doesn't make sense because he died. How the hell did he come back to life? He comes back with mechanical legs. I've never watched the show, but even I knew that. So I don't know. I guess some people don't know that. You know, again, not everyone's a crazy Star Wars fan. I know I kind of like undermined how much I love Star Wars by the fact that I don't watch Rebels or the Clone Wars, but point is, I knew Maul came back. I know his brother Savage Oppressive. Gosh, dude, the prequel names for bad guys were a bit ridiculous. Sidious, Maul, Tyrannus. It's a bit on the nose, don't you think? But look, the film is not perfect. It's not great by any means. It suffers from pacing issues, some awkward humor, and one of my biggest gripes about this film is how Han got his name, where he basically went up to this Imperial Guard to basically join the Empire, and they're like, Han, of who? What is your family name? And he's like, I don't have a family, I'm a loner. And he's like, so Han Solo. And then he just keeps the name. That was a bit strange for me because I thought it was always more poetic that his last name was Solo because that's who he is, you know? He's a guy who always works on his own with him and Chewie. So it's kind of strange that this random Imperial Guard gave him the name and he just kept it. But I don't know, it's not a gripe that ruined the film for me. The determinant factor of if I like or don't like a film is if every film has problems. It's just, do the problems outweigh the good? And if they do outweigh the good, how many of those problems can you overlook in order for the scale to balance back in the film's favor? If you can't overlook the amount of bad in a film, obviously the film is going to be bad in my mind. But if you can overlook some of the problems, sometimes it can even out or even make the film better for me. And that's what this film did. This film had some problems, and a lot of the problems I could overlook to the point where it tipped the scales back into the film's favor. This film is not perfect, but it's good. And that's the one thing I want to mention about this film, is going back to the whole like Star Wars fandom thing. People are already oversaturated with Star Wars, and I'm like, why are we oversaturated with Star Wars? Because we've only had 4 films. We're on the 19th film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that shows no signs of slowing down. So how come people are already starting to feel saturated with Star Wars, but not something like Marvel? And I think, honestly, at least for me, is because of the fandom. The fandom, guys, please, and I'm saying this as a fan, we need to calm down. Because the behavior of the fandom is toxic. And I will admit that the backlash against this film and the response to this film wasn't as bad as something like The Last Jedi, which was completely split down the middle. This, everyone seems to kind of be in agreement upon, was that it's not great, but it's better than I thought, and it's a pretty good movie. And that's what I'm glad to say, is that if you can just take this film and separate it from Star Wars, or separate it from your obsessive love over Star Wars, it will make you enjoy this film so much more. Because like I said, people hold Star Wars up to this unreachable standard that it's almost impossible for a Star Wars film to reach it. People always come up with what they would like to see in their heads, and then when that's not portrayed on the screen, they get upset, and then they bash the movie, in my opinion, unfairly. I think we just need to look at this film as a film. Look at Star Wars films as films. They're good films. Just because they didn't meet your standard does not mean they're bad films. We have to overlook our own biases sometimes. And I'm saying that as someone, I do have biases. Everyone has biases, but you have to overlook some biases. I hate the movie The Invitation. I think it's a terrible film. Everyone else loves it though. Everyone loves it. So obviously, I'm not just gonna sit back and say, I'm right and you're wrong. People love that movie, but guess what? I move on. I don't care. I keep my opinion, but I don't judge other people for their own opinions. It's just, I've never seen a film franchise or a film series get this much hate by people who love it. It's crazy to me. Just calm down, because this type of behavior toward a franchise really is toxic. The film is okay. I mean, if you've watched my reviews, I mention this a lot. I hate the fact that we're at the point in the movie world, in the movie criticism world, where there's only, especially with Star Wars, there's only an amazing life-changing movie or a crazy bad, ruin your childhood movie. There's no in between. There's no okay Star Wars film. There's no good Star Wars film. It's just this one or the other. And if you watch my Deadpool 2 review and my Tomb Raider review, you know that I hate that mentality, because this is a good film. But because Star Wars fans only have two sets of mindsets where they're like, oh, it can either be life-changing fantastic or life-ruining bad, it ruins the film for you. But if we could all just collectively take a breath, we would realize that there are good Star Wars films. Not great ones, but good ones, like Rogue One, or The Last Jedi, or Solo, a Star Wars story. In my personal opinion, in the new era of Star Wars, we haven't had one bad film. We've just had a lot of good films. And for Star Wars fans, that's just not enough. And that's kind of sad. And I don't mean to sound elitist or entitled here, I'm just saying that I do not like this mentality that there's no in-between when it comes to movies. Oh, and by the way, for those commenting right now saying that my opinion is invalid because I like The Last Jedi, you're just proving my point. I have opinions just like you, and just because our opinions differ doesn't mean mine is right and yours is wrong, or vice versa. This film was good, and we just collectively need to realize that not every Star Wars film is going to be a home run. Not every Marvel film has been a home run. Every Marvel film has been good so far, but not every Marvel film has been great. And that's my view of the Star Wars saga right now. There have been some good films and great films, and that's just what you have to expect with this ever-expanding franchise. Was this film perfect? No, it had some bad parts, but a lot of the bad parts I could overlook. And then the ones I couldn't overlook, the ratio of good to bad was still in the film's favor. So I liked this film a lot. Again, didn't love it, but I like it. I would give it like a 7.5 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's a good film. Just lower your expectations. Don't turn your brain off, because I hate when people say that. Just lower your expectations, because Star Wars fans, their expectations are beyond expectations. There's expectations, but then there's Star Wars expectations, which are just a whole different camp. Lower your Star Wars expectations and just enjoy the movie for what it is, which is a good movie. Alright, that's pretty much all I got to say. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot more that I forgot to mention. As always, that's pretty much it, guys. Peace.